Okay, shall we start, Maria?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to joint webinar session between CPA Australia, MBS Academy, and Trade Investment Queensland with the topic storytelling with data. My name Putra Idealis. I'm a Senior Business Development Manager of CPA Australia Indonesia office, and I will be your host today. Before we start our session, I would like to inform you that all participants please put on mute and you can not activate the camera just to make a better bandwidth for the presentation to be smooth. Therefore, if you have questions for our speaker today, please write down your questions and in the Q&A box or the chat box. So we will then read your questions to the speaker during the Q&A sessions. Now I would like to invite Bapak Reza Hafiz, Country Manager and Chief Representative of CPA Australia Indonesia Office to deliver his opening remarks. Pak Reza, the session is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Mas Putra. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm so excited to start the session. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mario, and then the team from MBS for being able to support the session today, and also to Ibu Irma and Mr. Ben Giles from the TIQ team Indonesia. It is a really being a very outstanding collaboration between three of us, and I'm looking forward to hear more about the session. So I believe the session itself is already my retelling itself, meaning a lot of things. And then in the session, Mario, I believe, will explain about what is a storytelling in the perspective of MBS. So without further ado, again, thank you for attending the session to all audience. And then looking forward for all the question and answers at the end of the session. And all the best.
Thank you, Pak Reza Hafiz. So before I move into the second person to deliver his remarks, please allow me to introduce and a warm welcome for Mr. Ben Giles, Trade and Investment Commissioner of Trade and Investment Queensland, Indonesia office. Welcome, Pak Ben. It is an honor to have you joining our session this afternoon. So Ben Giles commenced as Commissioner for Indonesia in July 2018. He has a 25-year experience in international business, including 15 years in the field of trade and investment. He also has a long-standing connections to Indonesia, having previously worked in Jakarta with both the Australian Commission of Trade and the private sector. So the session is yours, Ben, please.
Siang, and selamat siang, Bapak, Ibu, semua. Yeah, my name is Ben Giles. I'm the Commissioner here for Trading and Investment Queensland, TIQ. We're a government agency that helps Queensland Australian companies do business with Indonesia. One of these companies is MBS Academy. We're delighted to introduce Mario today. I've been in a few of these webinars that Mario has held, and this one is called Storytelling with Data. He is a wonderful storyteller. I guarantee it's going to be quite an intriguing session today. I don't want to take any more time. So look, I just want to thank Irma, my colleague here, for everything she's done, CPA Australia, Indonesia, of course, and Mario from MBS Academy. It's been wonderful. So thank you all. Sit back and enjoy, and we'll see you later. Thank you. Terima kasih ya.
Thank you for the remarks, Pak Ben. Terima kasih banyak. Now I would like to invite all the co-hosts and also speakers, participants as well, as if you can turn on the camera. We would like to have a photo session just before we start the presentation of Pak Mario. Oke, Tika bisa bantu untuk screenshotnya.
Okay.
Thank you, Tika. Dihitung ya.
I'll wait. Yeah, I'll wait until everybody turn on their video.
Kayak mesti tiga until 3 times ya, Tik, because we have 3 slides, I believe.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll do the first one.
Please, Tika.
I do the first one now. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Wait. Sorry for the wait. This is the second one.
Okay, the second one.
And another one. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you everyone for your cooperation. Let's continue.
Thank you so much, Tika, for your help. Thank you, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, for the photo section that we just had. So, ladies and gentlemen, before the session start, I would like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Mario Bojilov, Director of MBS Academy. Mario has worked in the area of data analytics and business improvement since 1994. He is also a certified information system auditor, or CISA, and also a lecturer in accounting information system, IS control and governance, enterprise resource planning, systems analysis and design. Over the last 15 years, Mario has taught 1,500 plus university students and 450 plus professionals in the area of finance, digital technologies, digital risk, and audit. He has delivered industry training, courses, and presentations in Australia, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, Kuwait, Oman, Thailand, and the Philippines. Mario founded Meta Business Systems, in bracket MBS, incorporating MBS Academy in 2004, of which he is the current chief executive officer. And now, to start the session, please give a warm welcome for our speaker, Mr. Mario Bojilov. Pak Mario, the session is yours.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. Ben, thanks a lot for the kind words and for all of the support that TIQ has provided MBS Academy. And also, Putra and Teresa, thank you very much for the collaboration. I'm very excited to be working together with CPA Australia in Indonesia. And I hope that today's session will be of use to all of you when you start working with data more and when you start presenting and trying to influence decision makers with your findings. So, without further ado, let me just share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Well,
yes, Mario.
Yes,
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So today we'll be talking about how do we use data in order to present our ideas to various types of audiences and to get them to take some action. So what we'll do, we'll start with a short introduction. Then we'll have a look at various techniques and tactics, what we can do in order to actually turn the data that we have into information. And we'll finish the session with a specific example from an Indonesian report that I found, which will show you how the things that we are talking today can be put into practice. And we'll have at the end a few minutes for Q&A. We already have some questions that have been asked during the registration. But if you have questions, please send them in the chat box. And Irma very kindly agreed to help me with the questions and to provide them to me at the end of the session. So before we start, I just would like to run a quick poll that you should see shortly. How easy do you find it to use data when you need to communicate to various types of audiences? Is the poll available? We'll be closing the poll shortly, but for those of you who haven't responded, there's still some time. I'm just looking at the statistics at the moment. What is very interesting is that 84% of the people are saying that it is not easy to use data to communicate well. And this has been quite a consistent opinion. We've run this session several times already, and people are always feeling in a very similar way. Seems like we are finding it hard to actually take the data that we have found somewhere and to present it easily to our stakeholders or our audiences. So another quick poll is, when you use data to present the ideas, do you always get the results that you want? Here are the results of poll number 1. We have a minute or so left, so if you haven't answered, you can do so now. There's still some time left. But while we're waiting for the last answers, I'm just looking at the results of the poll that we will share very shortly. But the situation seems to be very similar. There is a certain degree of difficulty when we want to use data and to influence people through the data that we have obtained in some way during our work. The interesting thing is that we have a lot of data at our disposal. The question is, how do we use it in the best possible way? Ultimately, we want to be able to use the data to drive business outcomes and business decisions. So here is the result. 97% of the people get the results every now and then, while only 3% get the results that they want always. Again, this situation is very consistent across the board, and this is what I see in different places of the world when I speak to people about data. So what we want to do today is actually make things a little bit easier for all of us to start using data, present it in a slightly different way, and start influencing people. Here is some data from a report that I have used in order to create the examples for this session. It is about corruption levels in various Indonesian provinces, and it's about the work which has been done by BPKP, which is the National Audit Office of Indonesia. So the first table gives us some statistics in terms of what has been found, how many cases of corruption, how many reports overall have been investigated, how the wages and the size of government actually influence the levels of corruption. Here we have some correlations which show us which variables influence levels of corruption in what way. And these are some conclusions that have been drawn based on the results from this study. Looking at these three tables, we want to be able to say that BPKP has done a good job, or maybe not such a good job, or pretty poor job. But can we do that? Because when we look at these three tables, it is very difficult to draw the conclusion of what exactly is happening. This is the data. The data is there, right? You can see it, but if we present that to a senior manager, what do we want them to do and how convincing we will be, no matter what we want them to do? So the question is, what we have here is several data sets that actually need to be used to drive some business decision making. And this is what this session is all about. It is difficult, but our goal today is to make that process a little bit easier and to give you some ideas that you can start applying tomorrow in your work. By the way, the presentation and the recording of the session will be available to all of you, so you'll be able to refresh your memory going forward. So, all right, so this is the situation. We have lots of data and we want to draw a conclusion about the type of performance BPKP has according to this academic study. Now, when we are presenting, when we start thinking about using data to present information to various audiences, we need to be aware of the situational background first. Even before we look at the data, we need to have a pretty good idea who are we presenting to and so on. Because if we are presenting to a bunch of engineers like these people here, that's one thing. If we are presenting to a bunch of senior managers, C-level executives, CEOs, CFOs, and so on, it is a totally different thing. These two groups of people have got different needs. They also see the world in a quite different way. So when we actually show them the data and the various types of graphs and so on, we need to be aware of that. So who is our audience? So the question number one, who is the audience? Question number two is, what do we want them to do? After they've seen our presentation, what do we want them to do? What action do we want them to take? Because we want to influence them. We are not doing the presentation just for the sake of it. We want something to be happening because we might have found some specific data. We want to influence them to take a specific action. Maybe it is to open a new branch of the company in another city or in another country. Maybe we need to hire another 50 people, or maybe we need to get rid of 50 people. What exactly we want to happen as a result of our presentation? What is the action? The last one is, how are we presenting? Now, it is one thing to be presenting live the way I'm doing now, where I know how the slides are going. I know what is the sequence of the slides, and I can actually explain things. But it is a totally different way to send a report to someone where we don't know, are they going to read it from the beginning to the end? Are they going to read it from the end to the beginning? Are they going to start in the middle? Or are they going to pick two or three main points that they like and something draws their attention? Again, depending on the situation, these are different things that we need to be aware where we're preparing our presentation. So a PowerPoint presentation needs to be at least slightly different from a presentation that will be sent as a PDF document or Word document. So who, what, and how are the first three questions that we need to keep in our mind to assess the situation and to start preparing for our presentation. By the way, this has got nothing to do with the data. We need to sit down and think on a piece of paper, throw some ideas around. We're not even touching data yet. Once we've answered those three questions, we are now ready to start building our presentation and our storytelling. So what are some of the things that we can use to help us with that? Now, we need to use different types of visuals. There is quite a few available to all of us in Excel or in other tools. The question is, which ones are the most effective ones? Starting with the simplest thing, just plain text maybe in a big font. This was one of the favorite techniques that the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, used. What you see here, 31.077 trillion. This is the losses from corruption in Indonesian rupiah in 2015. Now, on its own, this figure is difficult to comprehend and understand. So we can put some context around it. So loss due to corruption in Indonesia 2015. All right. So that puts everything into context. Now, however, we want actually the focus to be on the actual big number, not on the explanation. In order to do that, we can actually dim the explanation a little bit like that. So it's still there to be seen, but our focus now, our eye is drawn to the 31 trillion figure, not to the explanation. And if we want to underline or to make to emphasize some things in the explanation, we can actually make those a little bit darker, like here. So loss due to corruption in Indonesia 2015. Here, as soon as you look at that, the first thing that you see is the 31 trillion, and the second word that you see is the word corruption. So these two are linked. And after that, we can, the reader actually can have a look at the remainder of the explanation. So these are just some techniques. By the way, simple things work best. So these are just some techniques which allow us to focus the reader's attention on specific points that we want them to think about. And at the end, we'll put the source. I haven't come up with that figure out of the blue. There is a source behind it. In this case, it's the Journal of Society and Governance. As you can see, the source is in a little bit smaller font because it's not the main thing. but it is there just to support our ideas. Okay, the next type of visual that is used quite often are tables. We can see them all over the place. Here's an example of a table. This is one that when I was doing audit reviews, I used to include on the first page of my audit reports. It is the number of findings, high, medium, and low risk findings. To make it a little bit more, not colorful, but more interesting to the user and to draw their attention to specific things, I can use a traffic light color scheme. As soon as somebody sees this table, there I will be drawn automatically to the high risk findings, which actually are the most important ones. This is what most of the audit committees are interested in. Usually when I've done presentations before, every time it was the same story. Tell us about the high risk findings. In a presentation, medium and low risk, we're going to read it ourselves in the audit report. So when we actually use a color scheme like that, we can focus audience's attention specifically on certain things that we want them to think about. One thing about tables is that in presentations, usually it is best to avoid tables. Why? Unless you have something specific to say. In this case, I have something specific to say here with this complex, terrible looking table, and this is the fact that the purpose of this presentation is to actually avoid tables like that when we're presenting to audiences. But unless a table has got some specific purpose, do avoid it, because table essentially is not information. Table is just data. And we need to turn that into information in order to be able to act on it. Another type of visual used quite often is the heat map. So here we can actually draw the attention of the reader to specific points that we want them to focus first. If you look here, this is a real heat map from a report called Report to the Nations, which is issued every 2 years by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So here we can see the types of fraud per industry. And as you look at this table here, the first thing that will draw your attention is the darkest one. So in healthcare, actually 33% of the fraud is in billing. And actually it is the highest percentage of the whole heat map that you see here. If we look across horizontal lines across industries, we can see immediately that in banking and financial services, the highest percent of fraud is 18%, and this is cash on hand. If I look at energy, I can see that the highest percentage of fraud is billing, and that's 24%. So very easily, I can work out specific pieces of information. So heat maps are great to just draw the attention of the reader to some specific things. When we're presenting with data, our main goal is to get the reader to focus on the important stuff as opposed to trying to look at everything and having to work it out themselves. Another type of visual, which is we are all familiar, is just the simple line graph. Great to present trends over time, and also great to compare several series over time. As you can see here, there are two lines. We can see immediately what is their relationship over a specific period of time. Here's a real graph that comes from a report in the banking industry, and it just shows the fact that synthetic identity fraud is growing much faster as opposed to the overall fraud within the banking sector. The red line is synthetic identity, the blue line is just overall fraud rate. You glance at the graph, you can see immediately that the synthetic identity is becoming a much, much bigger problem over time. Again, we want to make the reader, to make it for the reader to understand very easily specific points in our presentation and storytelling. Slope graphs are great to present and to compare several series over 2 specific points in time. Here you can see a real slope graph from the same report to the nations, and this is the usage of whistleblower communication channels. When you look at the graph, it's immediately obvious that phone usage has decreased between 2018 and 2020 by the whistleblowers, while at the same time, email and web forms have increased significantly, which means that we can present that to a specific set of managers and explain to them, okay, these are the channels that are currently growing, so we need to do something about making it easier for the people to use these channels. It can be provide a specific email address, or we can provide a specific page on our intranet or in another place where people can submit their reports about suspected fraud. Again, very easy to understand. We can immediately see what's coming up, what's going up, what's coming down, and we can do something about it. Because ultimately, when we present this to a senior manager, as I said, we want them to take action, right? Waterfall is a great one to give you an idea about how parts relate to the whole. Here, on the left-hand side, we can see the total revenue for a company, and on the red and the green bars, we can see the different components. In this case, the red is the service revenue, and the green one is the actual parts that have been sold. So we can see that about 90,000, let's say, is sales of equipment, and 110,000 is the sales of services. After that, we actually can see that the revenue grew up by 120,000, consisting of different types of components. Very easy to understand how the whole and the parts relate to each other. Charts are available to all of us, and we have been using them for quite some time. So the actual thing that I would like to mention about charts specifically is that horizontal bar charts are much better and much easier for the reader to understand than the vertical bar charts. The reason for that is that actually we read from left to right. So in a horizontal bar chart, the first thing as we look at the chart, the first thing that we'll see is the various types of categories along the y-axis, the vertical axis. So as soon as we see the categories, then we know what each bar on the chart refers to. So we are mentally, our mind is already mentally prepared of what is going to follow. Of course, if you prefer vertical bar charts, nothing wrong with them. Simply the horizontal ones are a little bit easier, that bit easier to understand for the audience. Map charts are great if we want to present information related to various geographic regions. What you see here is the number of employees a company has around various parts of the world. Without knowing too much about that chart, except that its number of employees, I can see straight away that the company has got the most employees in India. It's the darkest green color on the chart. That's all that we need. And then we can see also that there aren't that many in South America or in Mexico. So the main bulk of employees are in India, and almost none in South America and Mexico, and then the rest of the world, there are different degrees. Very easy to understand, and very visual, very easy to grasp for a reader. If we take that in the context of Indonesia, with so many provinces, actually presenting something on a chart where each Indonesian province is colored in a different color, depending on what we want to present, the number of population, the budget, or the number of fraud cases, no matter what, would be very easy for a reader or for somebody in the audience to understand what our point is. A couple of things to mention about the visuals. Avoid 3D. 3D is very misleading and is very distracting. Yes, it can catch the eye initially, but the novelty wears pretty quickly, and we're left with a chart which doesn't exactly represent what we wanted to represent. Here is one example. Here is a chart of revenue and expenditure in the fictitious company across 4 quarters. And we're going to run a quick poll now. I just want you to have a look and tell me what is the difference in Q2 between the revenue and expenditure, the orange and the blue lines. The poll should be starting shortly. So what is the difference between the orange and the blue line? Is it 20? Is it 40? Is it 60? Is it 100? Okay, a few more. You're looking at the chart, so what do you think is the difference between the?
Give more time, Mario.
Yeah, let's leave it a little bit more. We've got 51%
All right.
answering, so. All right, so let's stop the poll. All right, so here are the results. So 27 or 31%, so pretty equal, about 30%. 30% think it's 40, 30% think it's 60. And then 20% think that it's under 20 or 10, no, sorry, or 100. So let's have a look what is the actual situation. So if I look at exactly the same chart drawn in 2D, and I'll just make it easy, I'll just draw a couple of lines so that it's easier to understand. Actually, the correct answer is 20. only 20% of people could get it, and every time I see this chart, I get confused myself. And the reason for that is that simply 3D, as I said, we are looking at different angles, it's misleading, our brain is jumping all over the chart. So it is best if you avoid 3D. It doesn't add too much to anything that you want to say, and actually can present your results in a completely different way. So some of the things that we need to put in place in order to communicate our ideas better is to try and make it as simple as possible for the reader or for the audience to understand our data, our graphs, our presentation. And there are some principles of design, the so-called Gestalt principles of design. There is quite a few of them, but there are 4 that actually apply to this a little bit more to this specific purpose. The first thing is proximity. When we see something on a screen or on a page, the things which are closer are perceived as being similar versus things which are a little bit further apart. So this can be used if you are designing tables to include in a printed report, where you can actually group rows of tables which have got some connection between them together. So some of the rows can be one height, then there can be a set of different rows which are different heights. So people instinctively will understand that these rows here relate to something similar and the other group of rows relates to something else. The other thing is similarity. Things which are similar, again, are perceived as being grouped together. So if we see, as you can see here, if we see a group of circles and group of triangles, we can instinctively think, oh, okay, these are things which are similar. So again, you can use it in tables, or you can use similarity by color. So if you color 3 rows dark gray and another 5 rows dark blue, immediately people will understand that these are somehow related to each other, and then they'll have a look at the data. Also, our eyes draw lines that do not exist. When you have a look, the so-called closure, and they try to enclose whatever space we see. As you can see here, the square is not drawn, but as you look at the slide, you immediately see a square. Most of us will see a square. So this is actually quite useful when we draw graphs and when we start skipping elements of the graph, because no matter the fact that the elements are not there, we still perceive them as being present. And the other thing is continuation. We instinctively want to draw patterns that will continue. And even if they are not there, our eye will make them. So if we have a bar chart, the horizontal bar chart, for example, if we skip the y-axis, our eye will still see it no matter what. So that allows these 4 principles allow us to actually start simplifying our visuals in order to focus on the important things. Here's an example. Okay, here's a chart. This chart, although look, actually, first, I think it's quite complex. There is a lot of elements here which are irrelevant to what I want to say. So how about we try and simplify it a little bit? When we do that, this is what we get. Now, do we really need the markers on the previous chart? Okay, so the greens, the blue squares or the orange rectangles? Not really. They do not add anything to that. Do we really need the grid lines at the back? Well, as I said, our eyes will keep drawing those lines no matter what. So actually, if I look at the top part of the blue line, I can see that it's somewhere between 880 and 900 pretty quickly. So there is no need to put the grid lines at the back, which are only distracting the user, the reader. So what we want to do is simplify it so that, okay, here what I see, there are 4 quarters. The legend is on the right-hand side. I can see immediately what we are talking about, and I can see the relationship between the revenue and the expenditure. This is all that I'm trying to present, because what I want to show, maybe my presentation is about the fact that in Q2 of the fiscal year, our revenue and expenditure dropped for whatever reason, and actually Q2 is a loss, but we've managed to recover in Q3 and Q4. That's all. Tables are very similar in that respect, that we want people to focus on the important part of the table, which is the figures. How do we do that? Okay, number one, what I can do here, I'll just make the titles fade in the background. All right. Okay, figures are still standing out. I can see 1, 6, and 5. Titles, which are secondary, and I can always go and read them, but I want people to see the figures first. Figures are standing out, titles go a little bit in the background. Also, this table here is, personally to me, is quite annoying because the borders are too heavy and they're standing out. I don't want that. I want actually the focus of the reader to be on the figures. So how about let's remove the borders? We still see everything. But what is the first thing when I come to this table? The first thing that I see is actually the figures, 1, 6, and 5. And the second thing that I see is the title for each one of these: high risk findings, medium risk findings, low risk findings. So this way, again, we are making it easy for our reader or for the audience to understand what we are saying, and reducing the amount of thinking they need to do, because we want them actually to focus on what we are saying as opposed to other things. Drawing attention. Okay, so let's have a look at a series of lines here. There's 4 of those. And let's just quickly run another poll. In your opinion, when you look at these 4 lines, which one is standing out? We can close the poll now. Okay, so here are the results. Actually, this is also quite consistent across various audiences attending this session. The thing is that people always think that the one that we should focus on is the one with the darkest color. And in this case, it's the red, then following by the blue, then following by the orange, and the last one is yellow. So the darker the color, the more the focus of our eyes is. And if we want to actually draw the attention of the reader to something specific like that, we can use color for that purpose. So here the lines, but we can use color. See, this line here with the arrow is darker. It's also thicker. Immediately, as you see, when you see this this line chart, your eye is drawn to the thick dark one. And here is what I've done with the same chart that I showed before, whistleblower communication channels. I wanted to underline that web forms are the ones that are being used a lot by whistleblowers, and we need to do something about that, give them an easier mechanism to submit their reports. So I made it thicker, and by default, it also becomes a little bit darker than the rest of them. So this is our visual perception. Nothing else has changed. The only thing that has changed is the color and the thickness. Immediately, your eye is drawn to that part that I wanted to emphasize. So now, when the people have focused on the one that I want them to focus, I can start talking about it. We can use color in a different way to actually emphasize certain periods in time. Like here, when you look at this chart, you can immediately see that there's something happening in the darker shade. Instinctively, your eye will be drawn there. Here's an example from before. First, I can use color to emphasize one. In this case, the web form, I used color to make it stand out from the rest of the graphs. There's 4. But I can also use color to emphasize the whole 2020 period. So in 2020, I wanted everybody's now looking at 2020. By the way, we can see some things are increasing, some things are decreasing. Let's talk about what's happened in 2020. Again, very subtle techniques to draw your readers or your audience's attention to specific things that you want to say. Another one. Let's draw a line to focus the audience attention on the bar charts, which are either below or above the line. When you look at this chart, the first thing that you see is instinctively you see that there is 3 which are way below the line because of the empty space there. This is what draws your attention, and then you can start talking about these things depending on what you want to present in your report. So draw a threshold line, eye automatically drawn above or below the threshold. One thing to keep in mind when we're presenting is that we're reading from left to right and from top to bottom. So actually, when you're doing, when you have several charts, several figures on your presentation, make sure that you follow that order, left to right, and then top to bottom, like that. Actually, specifically in this slide here, I on purpose changed the order because I went from the top left corner to the bottom right corner, then back to the top right corner, and then back to the bottom left corner. It was done on purpose just to demonstrate to you that it feels slightly unnatural when you're not following it. Actually, the proper way would have been chart number 1, top left, chart number 2, the lines with the shaded area top right, then the chart with the threshold bottom left and the bottom right. So keep that in mind and just follow the natural order the way we read. Of course, that doesn't apply uniformly across the world because in some countries the reading is from right to left. So if that's the case, then we just need to adjust if you are presenting to someone from an Arabic country, for example, or from Israel, because they are writing from right to left. Text and appearance. Now, when we want text is something that needs to be present when in your communications with data. Again, the simple the better. If we just keep use simple fonts like the one here, which is Arial, Helvetica, or one of those. No need for gimmicks. By the way, when you are presenting on screen, it's best to use that type of font. If you are actually sending a printed out report, which happens very rarely these days, it's better to use fonts like Times New Roman with the little bits at the end of each letter. So, but simple fonts, nothing like that, because this font, although it may look a little bit funky and interesting, really it's really easy to tire the reader, and sometimes they can just give up. If you have too many of these things, it will become annoying. People will just switch off. Also, when you want to emphasize parts of the text, one way to do it is using bold. Another way, if you want to put slightly less emphasis, use italic, like this one. If you want to put a lot of emphasis, you can use underline. But one thing to keep in mind, do not overuse underline on a page. Keep it to a minimum, 2 or 3 max, because again, it can be really annoying if there's too much of it, like the funky font that you see on line number 2. So if you want to emphasize things, it's best to use italic and very sparingly underline as a font. Chart title is precious. So you need to think of chart titles as the same as newspaper headlines. The purpose of a newspaper headline is to draw the attention and to get the reader to buy the newspaper. That's pretty much it. This is what the front page of Daily Telegraph is, one of the Australian newspapers from about 13, 14 years ago. As you can see, the title, Just Sack Yourself Premier. This is the most valuable space. This is the same for your chart. So when you are putting a title to your chart, think really carefully what you want that chart to represent and what you want to convey to the reader or to the audience, because this is the first thing that they'll see. You need to win them with the chart, and only then you can continue with the presentation. Text, keep it simple. Okay, so there is no need to write too much jargon. I know it's very difficult when you work in corporate environment, but at least we can try. I know that I still struggle with it personally, but I'm getting better at it, slowly, unfortunately. But have a look here, to be or not to be. This is a sentence that actually says a lot, and pretty much everybody in the world knows it. And it doesn't contain a lot of complex words or a long sentence with several different parts of it. Shakespeare said it quite well. I think that we can all learn from Shakespeare. So shorter words, shorter sentences can be quite impactful, not just on your communication with data, but overall in presentations and reports. One way to check how good and how readable your text is to use the readability test with the readability statistics, which is available in Word. It's a standard part of Word. It's sitting under spelling and grammar. You just need to enable it in options so that after spelling and grammar is completed, you will get also the readability statistics at the bottom, the stuff that you see here. Looking at the second last row, which says Flash Kincaid grade level, it shows that the way the text is written, it can be understood easily by somebody in grade 10. Now, if you get Flash Kincaid grade level above 15, this is postgraduate academic writing, but in simpler terms, it's just a nightmare to read and understand for anybody. Aim for 8 to 10, because this is something that most people can comprehend. It doesn't mean that they are in grade 8 or grade 9. It just means that it's simply the text consists of shorter sentences, shorter words, and it is easier for the reader to understand what is being said in the text. It is difficult, as I said, like I'm still struggling with that, but at least whenever I write some material, I always will run a readability test, and if it's above 10, I'll start working to actually bring it at least below 10. Sometimes I manage to get it to 7 or 8, sometimes I cannot, depending on what I'm writing, but something to keep in mind. So we're talking about stories, all right? So up until now, we were talking about the various components and various techniques and tactics, but now we actually have to put the whole thing together. Talking about stories, Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, actually gave us the blueprint that is currently being used around the world in various forms. So the stories must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's as simple as that. So we need to be prepared to actually formulate and present what we want to show the audience in a way like that. When I was doing the research for this presentation, I came across the hunger map from the World Food Program. It's a United Nations initiative. And actually, when you go to the hunger map, first you get some sort of a background. So this is the kind of the beginning. Okay, it tells you something about it. Then there is a little bit more information. Then there is a little bit more information, something else. And only after you've come across these things, there is some sort of an introduction. We get to the actual map. This is actually a real-time map that changes all the time. I just did a screenshot a couple of days ago. And we want to do something like that. We want actually to present our story in such a way. This is something that currently is being used by every successful movie script writer, by every successful novelist, and we need to follow something along the lines. I appreciate the fact that we're not writers, but at least having the idea and following it loosely will help immensely. You will see specifically how very shortly. So how do we do that? Have a look. Okay, we need to have a beginning where the problem is where some kind of problem is being formulated. In this case today, my beginning was when I showed you the first screen on the introduction, when I showed you 3 tables, which are incomprehensible essentially, and told you that based on these tables, we need to draw some conclusion about the performance of a government agency. Well, this is the problem, too much data, and how do we actually make something with it? In the middle, then, as up until now, we just been talking how to communicate well with data. So I've given you some pointers, some techniques and tactics that you need to use. And at the end, you need to show how the problem has been solved. This is what actually I'm going to do shortly. So is BPKP doing good, bad, or average job? Okay, well, let's see based on the same report. So BPKP is doing a great job, right? Okay, so here's the statistics of the report that I used. And this table here shows me that there are 128 BPKP reports that have been investigated over a 3-year period between 2012 and 2015. There is a number of corruption cases that have been uncovered in each province. The mean is 1.3 cases per province, which is line number 1. The minimum is 0 in some provinces, and the maximum is 4.5 in some other provinces. It also provides some other information in relation to the data. Also, the second table shows the correlations between different variables which would have been used in the study. It also shows that some variables are very closely correlated, 0.952%. So as a result of that, there can be some some skewness in the correlations, and we need to remove that by excluding them. And then it showed us that this is based on regression analysis that we have done using the second and the first table. These are the results of the correlation analysis in table number 3. Based on these 3 tables and what I've just explained to you, my conclusion is that BPKP is doing a great job. Okay, and remember that BPKP is doing a great job. So our last poll is, did I really convince you by showing you these three tables, explaining briefly what each one of them contains, explaining briefly the data in those tables, and making a conclusion that BPKP is doing a great job? So let's have a look at poll number 5. Are you convinced, based on what I just showed you, that BPKP is great? All right, a few more answers. We have 30 seconds before we close it. Okay, let's close the poll. So 46% said no, 54% said yes. I'm personally on the side of the people who said no, because I'm not convinced at all, looking at a lot of meaningless data pretty much. Why are we thinking that BPKP is doing a great job? Well, it can be because it's a government agency, that's one thing, but certainly the data does not support that in any meaningful way, at least for me. But let's have a look how we can actually change that in order to make it a little bit more interesting for the audience and a little bit more credible. Okay, so let's tell a story. In 2015, 31 billion rupiah was lost due to corruption. We wanted to see what's going on and how BPKP is actually helping fight corruption in the country. And we looked at 128 BPKP reports in the period of 2012 to 2015. On average, there were 1.299 fraud cases in each of the provincial governments, with a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 4.5 cases per government. The average audit opinion issued by BPKP was 3.87, starting from on a scale of 1 to 4, with 1 being an adverse one and 4 being unqualified. So actually, it's quite good. The provincial governments are performing well. What we can see here is also that there is a positive correlation between the level of irregularities that or audit findings that BPKP auditors found and the levels of corruption, which can be explained that the more irregularities have been noted by BPKP, the more corruption has been uncovered. So actually, BPKP auditors and BPKP activities over various provincial governments are certainly helping cover cases of corruption and fight and put measures in controls in place to reduce it. So based on these figures and conclusions, we can actually say that BPKP as an organization is highly effective as mandated by the President Law 194 of 2014. What you see here on this slide is exactly the same information coming from exactly the same data as what you saw on the previous slide with the 3 tables and me just saying BPKP is very good. Yes, probably, but how about we actually turn all that data that is difficult to comprehend into something which is much easier to understand and make sense to everyone. So this is the end of the presentation. So before we finish, I just want to make a couple of points. When we look at data, we want actually to turn data into information. This is the main thing. Very often, I do see data which just stays data. It doesn't give us the high-level picture. It doesn't give us some ideas about what needs to be done. It just remains data. So what do we do with that? Not much. We need to start thinking in a slightly different way, start looking at presenting the background, start looking at presenting the middle of the story, and then start looking at getting the people to do something or influencing them in some way with our ideas. The other thing that I would like to say is that this is not rocket science. By the way, all of the graphs that you saw here in the presentation today, all of the visuals have been done using Excel. I haven't touched anything else. Now, there's one other tool that personally I like called QIS. It's a free one and it can be used to present map data, like the one that I showed you with the employees of the company around the world. Other than these two, yeah, there's a lot of tools out there, but there is no need to go into the deep end. Of course, if you already use Tableau or Click or something else, keep using it. There is nothing wrong with that. If you don't, just don't be stopped by the fact that you don't have the tools. You already have the tools. You have the Excel, and if you need the map data, you can go to QIS. But there's no need to start with that. So this is all from me. This is the end of the presentation. So now I'm ready to start to take some questions from the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Mario, for the presentations. Yes, Pak, we have some of the questions from participants. Number one from Maria Camila Sainz Cifuentes from Roche. So what is the first step to tell stories with data? Where should I start? So we have a few questions, Pak Mario. Do you want to answer one by one, right?
Yeah, I'll answer them one by one.
All right,
okay,
all
so
right.
as I said, okay, the first step is to assess the situation. Who are you presenting to? Are you presenting to the top level management? Are you presenting to the middle level management? Are you presenting to various professional engineers or line managers which are at the front line? This is number one. Number two, what do you want them to do? What do you want to tell them, and what do you want them to do based on what you've told them? And number three, what is your medium? Is it a live presentation, PowerPoint like this one, or is it a report? These are the first three questions. Now, do not, before you even look at, you know what the data represents, because in some way you have obtained the data and you know what you want to say. So sit down with a piece of paper, preferably, if not Word or an editor would do, and write down the answers to these three questions. Who am I presenting to? What am I presenting to them, and what do I want them to do? Number three, how am I going to do it?
Thank you, Mario, for the answers. So we shall continue to the second question from Bapak Mangapu Sitanggang, Piridam Pharma TBK. So how we measure the quality of data and what the parameters?
The quality of the data, yes. This is a very interesting question. It depends what you are presenting. Now, coming from an IS audit background, I have a little bit of a special view on that. Personally, I think that data which is not of great quality is already telling me a lot. If I have data with lots of problems, to me that shows a problem with some sort of a business process or with some sort of a system control. The data that shouldn't be there, if it's there, there's a deeper problem that needs to be solved. Now, in terms of measuring the quality of the data, we know what are the business rules for that data. They can be obtained quite easily from the people who are working with the application, producing the data, and we can see pretty quickly which records do not follow the business rules. This is usually hard-coded somewhere, and if you go and speak to the business areas, they'll tell you what these rules are. Quite likely, they will also tell you what the problems are, because probably they have been suffering with these problems themselves for quite some time. The other thing to keep in mind is when looking at data, try to get as close as possible to the source of the data. So if you have an application, for example, an application which processes payments from customers, if you can, in an ideal scenario, get the data from the terminals where the payments are processed. Do not get the data from the central computer, because that data has already gone through 1 or 2 stages of processing, and it is not representing the true picture. The true picture comes from the source. So the closer to the source, the better, in which case your data will be, the quality of the data will be much higher. After that, you are starting to be dependent on various pieces of software and introducing essentially noise in the data. But these are the 2 main points. And do not discard the data, as I said. Data which has got problems in itself tells a story.
Thank you, Mario. So we move to third questions from Bapak Tommy Sucipto, UNDP. How do we determine the best use for vertical and horizontal graph?
Well, as I said, it's a matter of personal preference, but personally, I want to go with horizontal, specifically for the bar charts, simply because this is the natural flow as you are looking at a piece of paper or the screen. You are reading from left to right, so on the horizontal, you can see what you are representing on the left before your eye hits the actual graphs. But that's the only, other than that, it's up to you. If you prefer vertical, by any means, but horizontal is just that a little bit easier.
All right, noted on that, Mario. We move to fourth question from Sukman Zakaria. So 2 questions.
Yep.
Number 1, any specific certification for data? Number 2, how large a data together to make up story?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the second one. Okay. The more the better. The more the better. But we just need to be mindful of practical considerations. If you can get, sometimes it also depends how big is some data sets are. So in some cases, you can have a data set of only 100 records, and that's the complete data set. If you get that, that's great. In some other cases, you have millions of records. So whatever the overall size of the data set is, try to get as much as possible in terms of percentage from it. If you get 100% of the data set, that's the best. Doesn't matter the overall size of the data set. If we get into millions, that creates some additional problems in terms of processing, but in most cases, I don't think that's an issue. If you pull information from accounting systems or from, like in an organization with a payroll of 5,000 employees, paying on a monthly basis, if you pull and on average 7 line items of payslip, that's 35 line items, 5,000 by 7, 35 line items per pay period over 12. This is what, about 420,000 all up. That would fit in Excel. So try to get as complete data set as possible. But some data sets are just small. If you look at the total number of documents produced by a department in a year, that data set can be 5,000. So in this case, if you get the 5,000, that's great. In terms of certifications, to be honest, I'm really starting to get lost here because there are so many around at the moment that I cannot keep track, to be honest with you. Just go with a reputable provider. You know who they are. Can be university, can be a professional body like CPA or Institute of Internal Auditors or ISACA for IS auditors. All of these are good.
Okay, thank you, Mario. So we move to further questions from Claire Sherlin, PT Penjaminan Infrastruktur Indonesia. How to present the technical financial data to non-finance efficiently and understandable? In brackets, sometimes I feel I talk by myself.
I feel like that myself quite often as well. All right, so the question, actually, when this is the motto of our company, MBS Academy, digital knowledge for non-technical professionals, or digital technology for the rest of us. So we just need to keep in mind that the people that we are presenting to, in most cases, do not know what we are talking about. They are not in our profession, so they do not know the terms. Like, okay, this is a presentation for CPA Australia, right? So the majority of the people in the room are accountants. Now, that may be a surprise to the accountants, but the average population out there on the street doesn't know what debit and credit is. And when they hear credit, they usually associate it with a credit card. So when you talk about debits and credits, you actually need to put it in a language which is understandable to the people that you're presenting to. So if you follow that, if you just try to explain it like that, that would be awesome. What I do, sometimes I talk to my wife. She's in the same profession, but she's a business analyst. So she's involved with technology, but in a different way. So actually, I run some of these things past her and ask her, do you understand what I'm saying? And somebody who hasn't been involved in the preparation of a presentation is a very good option for you because they don't have your perspective. Totally outside perspective, run it. Yep, that's great, I understand. Cool, let's move on. Sometimes I even will try it on my kids. The older one is 15 and I'll ask her, do you understand what I'm saying? And if she gives me the thumbs up, it's all good. I know that a lot of people will understand it. And when she tells me no, we're going back to the drawing board. So just keep that in mind. People do not avoid jargon, assume that they don't know what you're talking about simply because they're in a totally different area and start from there.
Yeah. Agree with you, Mario, and that's a great answer.
Thank you.
Hope it can clarify Ibu Claire. Yeah. So we continue to next question from Adi Fitria Dinastiar, IACEPA, ACP Catalyst. So the question is, how can we communicate and engaging people to economic partnership and collaboration through data storytelling?
Okay, so now we need to be mindful of the fact that data storytelling is there on a tactical level. On a strategic level, to engage in a partnership, we need to have some common objectives or goals. If these are missing, data storytelling is not going to help us, no matter what type of story we tell. If we know what our common goals are, then we can actually present the data which supports those and shows the other party why the partnership is so good for both of us.
Okay, Mario. We have another question from Gabriela Barbosa Wada. So from the way you used to present data until now, what was the tip that caused the biggest impact to your delivery?
Simplification actually was the biggest one. I used to have charts with a lot of information, a lot of totally unnecessary things like lines in the background, colors, that type of stuff. Simplification is the one that made the most difference. And I wasn't aware of the storytelling aspect up until a few years ago, so I definitely didn't start as a storyteller. Well, I'm an electronics engineer. The engineers are not exactly the greatest storytellers in the world, right? So I had to learn, but simplifying is the one that made the most difference. And the other one was the 3D, avoiding 3D altogether.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you for that. Simplifications, easy wordings, no jargon, and then use visual, easy to understand visual, right?
Yeah, and we ran the same session with TIQ last week, and there was a question about animations. Animations are okay if we use them sparingly, if we don't overdo them. There can't be too much of a good thing. A little animation here or there is okay for a few seconds, but when you have an animation that drags for 2 minutes, I think that by the time it finishes, everybody is already switched off. So from the presentation, so it's okay to use it, but just a little.
Yes, we have a comment from Boyd Tyndale. No more tables.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Not in PowerPoint presentations. Yep.
Thank you for the answers, Mario. Thank you, Bapak Ibu. If I don't know if you still have other questions while we have Mario here, and I think this is the best opportunity to explore and discuss with Mario. We still have another more minutes to ask the questions. Please feel free to do so. For the previous participants who have submitted their questions, I hope, we hope, me and Mario, what Mario described can answer to your question, can clarify to your question. Otherwise, if not, please put comments or more questions in the chat box. Yeah.
Thank you for the kind words, Reza.
No more questions? Oh, wait a moment.
Okay, software template. All right. One of the, so there is, as I said, Excel is a great software. There is one which is a drag and drop mechanism that we use. We use it, but it's not just specifically for data visualization. It's actually more on the data science / data analytics side. It's called NIME. It's drag and drop. Actually, this module here is part of a micro-credential, which is data analytics in accounting. And in the data analytics in accounting, starting with very simple analysis and moving through more complex stuff and ending up with artificial intelligence, we do use NIME across the board for simple to complex stuff. And visualization, it also has got some visualization modules that can be included there as well. So 9, by the way, it's free to download and free to use in enterprise context. It comes with 2 versions, paid and free, but the free is okay to be used in large enterprises, which is always an issue. So check it out and stick to, so 9, Excel, GIS will cover probably 99.99% of your needs. The remaining 0.1%, I'm not sure yet.
Thanks, Mario. Hope to help answering your question, Harsa Singh. Mario, we have more questions here from Ahmad Zaki Arifin, IIGF, the Indonesia Infrastructure Guarantee Fund. The question is, how can we make a simple data from a complex resources and delivery to audience from various backgrounds?
Well, as I said, this is what we did today. Remember the 3 tables that I showed you? They are quite complex, right? Now, they are part of an article which took me a couple of times. I had to read through the article to understand what the conclusions are. And based on that, after that, I knew what I want to present. So in this case, the story that I wanted to tell was, okay, here's a complex piece of data which shows something. This is how you can actually simplify it. And this is how you do it specifically to put it all together. So this is the process that I showed today. So review the presentation, you'll get a copy of the presentation and just follow that path, because this is exactly what we did today. By the way, my contact details are available. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer if there's a specific question or something you get stuck with something and want some advice.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We have another questions, Mario, from Riana Sitawati, Dharma Putra Economic Schools. How is the curriculum in accounting higher education can be improved to include data storytelling skills?
Well, I taught accounting information systems for 7 years. It's really difficult for me to comment, because that depends on each university and on the point of view of the head of faculty or head of department. One thing that you can do, you can actually take a presentation like that and just include it as one of the lectures. Because the data analytics components data analytics in accounting is becoming part of that, part of the university curriculum in various forms. The simplest thing, if you are a lecturer, this is what I'll do. I'll just prepare a lecture based on something like we've done today and explain to the students what can be done. Most lecturers, or at least I as a lecturer, always have the discretion to change 1 or 2 lecture topics to my liking. Just do it. Usually we follow some sort of a textbook, but 1 or 2 lectures can be in a slightly different topic.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Mario. Is there any more questions from participants, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen? So your LinkedIn profile, Mario Bozilov, yeah? I will add.
Yeah, Mario Bozilov. So when you do a search on Mario Bozilov, there isn't that many of us, and there is only one with this type of hairstyle. So you will find me quite easy.
Okay. Yeah, noted on that. Mario, we have more questions here from Jessica Samantha.
Yes.
Talking about software, what is your opinion about Microsoft Power BI in terms of data processing and visualization for presentation purpose in compared to Excel and QIS? Since Power BI app is currently booming in the industry as a means to visualize and to analyze the data.
I think it's great. Okay, so we just need to keep in mind that Power BI is essentially the bigger brother of Excel. It's great because it provides a lot of enhanced functionality. It's got the same interface, so people who are familiar with Excel can get used to Power BI. Allows access to a lot of different data sources. So I think it's very good. I haven't used it for map data, so I don't know how it will cover the functionality in GIS. but certainly it can replace a lot of the functionality which is in Excel. Because I think actually the underlying engine for graph set visualizations is the same thing.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Mario. Is there any more questions from the participants? Well, if not, we can finish up the session, Mario.
Yes. Well, just thank you very much, everyone, for being here. You will receive a survey about the session tomorrow. It will be great if you answer it, because we would like to get some feedback on what we're doing. Thank you very much to TIQ, Ben, Irma, and also to CPA Australia for the opportunity to collaborate. And I'm looking forward to running similar sessions in the future.
Indeed, Mario. Indeed. Thank you so much to our speaker, Bapak Mario Bojilo, for the insightful session that we just had. And also thank you to all of you participants who attend here today with us. Thank you, Mbak Irma from Trade Investment Queensland. Thank you, Ben Giles. It is really our honor to have you here, joining the full session from the beginning up until now. It's a really insightful session and very good insight from Mario.
Indeed, there's always something new to learn from Mario. It's good.
Always something new, always something new.
Thank you.
I feel lucky to be here as well and to deliver as MC here. To all CPA Australia members, Bapak, Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, to participants as well, we hope that you are always in a good health and stay safe out there. And we hope that to see you again in our upcoming online events in the near future. Again, stay safe, stay healthy and happy, and wishing you an enjoyable afternoon in Jakarta and enjoyable evening maybe in Australia, and enjoy your next event, Mario. I believe we want to plan some events after this.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Irma, Pareza, and my team, Aida, Mbak Aida, Mbak Tika.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bapak Ibu members.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a
Pak
lot.
Ben, Ibu Irma, team from TIQ, MBS, and all to
Thank you.
audience.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Mbak Irma.